Before we get into actually going out in the field and taking photographs, we need to talk about the gear. And the first place that I want to start is with the cameras and lenses. I have a lot of gear to cover, but don't worry, you can access all of my gear in a list format on the website where I list everything out in detail, why I have it, and how I use it. My situation is a little unique compared to others. I don't just travel full-time, but I'm also location independent. In March of 2012, we actually left, my wife and I left and went on the road full-time. We don't have a home, we don't have a place that we can swap out gear, so everything that I bring with me has to stay with me. I don't have to pack for each trip, I just repack everything that I already have. I shoot with both Fujifilm and Nikon systems, so let's get into the Nikon system first. The Nikon body I use is the D810. I really like this camera. It's got great resolution, 36 megapixels. It's ultra sharp. It's really good in low light. It has a great high ISO rating. It really works well with my night photography. The lens that's currently on the body is actually my favorite lens as well. It's the Nikon 14-24. It was actually one of the first lenses I ever purchased for its wide angle. The other thing that's great about it, it has a low aperture rating of f2.8, making it perfect for capturing the night sky. Something to note about this lens is it is very expensive, and for the majority of the shots that I take, it's not really necessary. I use it more of a specialty lens for capturing the night sky and working with extremely wide angles. So don't be worried if you don't have a fast lens at f2.8. As long as you have something that's wide to medium, you should be able to capture most of the shots that we have in this series. So moving on to the additional lenses, I recently picked up the 16-35 f4, which is much lighter than the 14-24, and you don't lose that much going from 14 to 16 millimeters. The main reason I picked up this lens is because it works really well with my 100 millimeter filters, because I can screw on a 77 millimeter adapter ring and attach my filter holder and my 100 millimeter filters without any issues whatsoever. The advantage of this over the 14-24 is this one does not allow, the 14-24 does not allow screw-on filters. I have to have a special mount and extra large filters for this. So ever since I picked this lens up, I'm really happy with it. It's much more easy to use in the field and swap filters. Another great advantage of the 16-35 over the 14-24 is the price. It's half the price. You will save $1,000 by buying this lens before this one here. The next lens that I use often with my D810 is the 24-70. It's also an f2.8 lens, which gives me the ability to capture the night sky. It's also very expensive. So again, it's a specialty lens, but for me, with the night sky, that f2.8 rating comes in really handy. Mainly I shoot wide. I'd even say that I shoot 90% of my shots are somewhere between 14 and 35 millimeters. So I don't use this lens often, but when I do, it gives me that extra reach up to 70 millimeter. Finally, this is the 28-300 f3.5-5.6. This is a lens that I don't use very often, but I do find myself needing every once in a while. Now, a lot of people travel with the really big, bulky 70-200, but since I'm traveling full time, that lens is so heavy, I had to pick a more compact, portable option. As you can see, this thing packs up really well, but look how far it actually zooms. So it's a really good thing to have in your bag because it doesn't take up that much space. It's also a great walk-around travel lens, and it's half the price of the 24-70. So it's a good place to start with an incredible focal range of 28-300. So to recap the Nikon gear, you can see that I'm traveling with 4 lenses. I used to travel with just 3 lenses, and I also used to travel with bigger filters that were just for the 14-24. But I picked up the 16-35, and I'm really happy with it because it works so well with the filter. So this is more lenses for the Nikon than I usually travel with. Eventually, I may even phase out the 14-24. So let's move on to the Fujifilm X-T1. This is honestly probably my favorite camera that I've ever owned. Over the D810, it has an articulating screen, which is really nice. It's completely water resistant and weather sealed, so I can take it anywhere. It also weighs a lot less than any of this Nikon gear. In fact, this camera with a few lenses weighs just as much as the Nikon with the 14-24. So it's incredibly powerful and compact. I can put this in pretty much any bag that I have and take it anywhere. If I'm scouting or shooting, this camera rarely leaves my side. This is a mirrorless camera, and it has an APS-C crop sensor. So it's going to give you a little bit different feeling than the standard DSLR at full frames, but it's still very powerful at 16 megapixels. Being that it's a crop and a mirrorless camera also makes it super light and super compact. So there are a lot of advantages to shooting mirrorless these days. Another thing we're going to be dealing with a lot is camera shake. And the nice thing about these mirrorless cameras is they have no moving parts. This camera has a little bit different of a feel than a standard DSLR, and compared to the D810, it also has a few key differences. One, the ISO value on this Nikon D810 allows me to go down to a low 30 on its low mode. This goes down to 200 at the minimum. So sometimes I like to do my long exposures on the Nikon because I get an extra few stops of light that I can change to. Other than that, everything's exactly the same. And the nice thing about it is all the dials are on the top of the camera, making it very intuitive to shoot, whether you're doing landscape stuff or even putting a different lens on and doing some street photography or just walk around photography. It's very, very powerful. Another huge advantage of this camera system over the Nikon is that it's literally 1/3 the price of what I have sitting here. So in other words, you pretty much save money all around, not just on the camera body, but the accessories and the lenses as well. Now the lens that's on the camera right now is my favorite. It's the 10-24. With the crop value, it actually transitions into basically a 16-35. So it's very powerful and very wide. This lens also has a fixed aperture rating of f4, and it also has optical image stabilization built right into the side. The next camera I want to talk about is the Fujifilm X-M1. Now this is an older Fujifilm camera. It's actually a streamlined version of the X-E1 that's been further replaced by the X-E2. I picked this up a while ago just as a behind-the-scenes camera, something that's light, easy to carry, and just throw into any bag. This camera is actually responsible for most of the moments between shots you'll find on Facebook and Google+. So I started using it pretty much exclusively for that, since I usually shoot with 2 cameras and I still like to have a handheld camera to work with while I'm in the field. So this one also stays in my bag. It's extremely lightweight. It also has an articulating screen, and it's really intuitive and easy to use. The lens that's attached to this camera right now is the 35mm f1.4. This is an awesome lens because it's extremely fast, making it the perfect handheld shooting device. Both of these Fujifilm bodies use all of the same lenses, so let's talk about some of the ones that I use. Just like the Nikon system, I probably shoot wide 90% of the time, but when I'm not shooting wide, I shoot medium, and the medium version of the lens for the Fujifilm is actually a kit lens, and it's an 18-55. It's really powerful, it's very sharp, and it's very useful, and it has an aperture rating of f2.8-4, which means at 18mm it'll be 2.8, and at 55 it'll be 4. So it's a really fast kit lens. It's actually one of the best kit lenses on the market. One of the other lenses that I find myself using pretty often is the 14mm fixed f2.8. So this is the lens that I use for my night sky shots with the Fujifilm body. It's fixed, it's fast, and it's actually pretty wide, so it captures the night sky really well. Again, I don't shoot zoom very often, but when I do, I actually have the 55-200 f3.5 to 5.6. So this is a really good solution for telephoto with the Fujifilm. It doesn't weigh very much and it extends very far, so it's really powerful as a telephoto solution. It's also even less weight than this version of the Nikon 28-300. So the last lens I want to talk about with Fujifilm is the 56 f1.2. So the 35 was an f1.4. This is an f1.2, making it one of the fastest lenses you can get by Fujifilm. And it's a really great lens because you can get a really soft focus effect when you're shooting street photography, portraiture, or people. So in all honesty, it's a lens that I don't use very often, but I feel like I should use it more because it creates such a beautiful, soft focus effect. So anytime I'm shooting people, I use this lens. But as you guys will see in this video series, I don't shoot people very often. Now that I've covered the basic camera systems, I also just want to cover trigger releases. So I have trigger releases for both the Fujifilm and also the Nikon. For the Nikon side, I actually use the intervalometer, though to be honest, I don't really time intervalometer shots very often. I actually use it because it has a built-in timer. When I press this down for long exposure, I'll actually see a count right here on the screen, and it has a little light that illuminates it, so I can do 2, 3, 4 minute exposures and know exactly how much time it takes. On the Fujifilm X-T1, I don't have to have that screen because it actually shows me on the back of the camera. It gives me a nice little countdown as I'm doing long exposures. So this one's a little bit heavier and a little bit more robust, and this one's a much simpler solution. With all these cameras and lenses, I definitely have to keep them clean. Usually I try to blow off the dust, so this is the standard little rocket blower that everybody travels with. I also have microfiber cloths hidden in every coat pocket and every bag I have pretty much everywhere around anywhere I'm staying, so I always have one handy. And I also use, for cleaning, I like to use the Hoodman cleaning system. It comes with a wet wipe and a dry solution. With one of these double packs, I can actually clean all of these cameras and lenses and then go on to clean other stuff. So these are really great when you're shooting in dynamic landscape environments, when there's ocean spraying or wind or bugs or anything that's getting these cameras really dirty. Sometimes a standard microfiber cloth just isn't enough to get the gunk off the lens, so you can take one of these out, wipe everything down, dry it off, and be as good as new. You may be asking yourself why I'm still using two camera systems. Well, the Fujifilm system is very exciting because it's the newest mirrorless technology. So I'm really excited about the future. And in the near future, I can see myself switching entirely to the mirrorless format. But for now, the DSLR still has some advantages. Particularly right now with the Fujifilm system, it's really good in low light. And that's not just because of the extra ISO rating in the camera, that's also because of the lenses. But that's going to change soon. Fujifilm will catch up and there will be really fast lenses and higher ISO ratings. Probably the most obvious distinction between these two camera systems is the megapixel count. This is 16, this is 36, so this will yield much bigger images. I also shoot a lot of panos, and when I shoot panos, I do not use the 36 megapixel because it's too much. I use the 16 because I'm creating stitched images that become very large. Working with 36 megapixel panos is a little bit too cumbersome. As a travel photographer, weight is definitely a big concern. So in the future, I'd like to be traveling just with the Fujifilm lenses and bodies because they're so much lighter, they take up less space, they're easier to pack, and much easier to deal with in multiple airlines, train travel, and any other type of transportation. The Fuji X-T1 is also really easy to sneak pretty much anywhere. If I bring the D810 with the 14-24 on it, security stops me right away. But if I bring a little camera like the X-T1 in, I can get away with anything. That basically covers all of my cameras and lenses. Let's move on to tripods and support. There's a lot of stuff to cover here, so I'm going to kind of start with the medium, regular tripods, and then I'm going to get into the peripheral stuff and all the extra gadgets and things that I have as well. Now, I travel with two tripods, one portable, one full size. This middle one is actually for my wife, Naomi. This is the one that she travels with, but I thought it'd be a good time to show you guys the progression of more powerful, more heavy and sturdy tripods. Let's start with a small one. This is a Really Right Stuff TQC 14 with a BH30 attached to it. This is the second to smallest ball head they have, and it's actually one of the smallest and most portable tripods that they have. All of my tripods that I use are carbon fiber, and this one's pretty cool because it's really portable, and it also has a center column, so it's really nice. It's extremely supportive, and it's actually perfect for the Fuji X-T1 system. Everything that I use with Really Right Stuff is lever release. So each one of my cameras have what I call an L bracket attached to them. And what that allows me to do is quickly clamp the camera down, lock it into place, and change the orientation. So each one of these ball heads is set up to work with any of my cameras based on these L plates being attached. It's a really powerful and convenient feature. So that's the TQC14. I really love it. It's super light, fits in a little bag, works with everything, super rock solid and stable. The next step up is the TVC24. This is also a portable tripod because it has 4 sections instead of the standard 3. So it actually collapses a little bit further, fits in more bags, and it works with a slightly bigger ball head, the BH40, which is a little bit more sturdy and stable than this BH30. So this is a great solution, and as I said, I'll use it pretty often, but this is Naomi's primary tripod. So that's the medium range. Let's move on to the big guy. This is the TVC33S. S because I'm actually kind of short. It's actually the shortened version of this 3-section tripod. It's the most stable tripod that Really Right Stuff has on the market. It also has the biggest ball head on it, which is the BH55, which seems to be an industry favorite among professionals. I also have one more thing on this that's not a standard issue, and that's a leveling base. Let me see if I can show you guys this here. This leveling base actually allows me to make precise changes to the leveling. Now this works with panos, and I'll explain that a little bit more later. Now standard way to get this tripod is just with a regular apex on it where you attach or screw on the ball head. This is a little bit different. Since it has this extra leveling base on it, it actually gives me a nice quick lever release again for the ball head, so I can swap this ball head with my pano gear on the fly. So this is the tripod that I carry into the field everywhere that I go. It works incredibly for landscapes because it's not too heavy, but it has a long leg span. All these tripods come with hooks right here in the center where you can weight them or hang trigger releases or different peripherals and things that you use. But basically, the wider the leg span of a tripod, the more sturdy it can become. So this is really good when you're dealing with grass or different parts of landscape where you have uneven and soft surfaces. So those are the three big guys that I have in my toolkit. Let's take a look at some of the fun, more sneaky stuff. Remember when I was talking about the camera gear and I said a small camera can get you into more places and you can be a little bit more sneaky? Well, so can little tripods. So this is one of my favorite things that I travel with. This is a TFA01 aluminum tabletop tripod. It has their smallest ball head attached to it, which is a BH25. Again, it's going to be a lever release just like all my other ball heads. And this thing, believe it or not, will hold 50 pounds of weight, completely stable. I've actually been able to do panos with this in Europe. In Rome specifically, on some of the bridges, you have these really big concrete balustrades and support columns. So this works everywhere. I can sneak this into churches, I can sneak it into cathedrals, I can basically keep it in my pocket, and anywhere I find a flat surface, I can set up and do long exposure, pano, or any kind of tripod shot. So this is a great thing to have for any travel photographer. So this is really cool and it allows me to set up on flat surfaces everywhere, but what happens if I don't have a flat surface to use? Then what I use is a clamp. So this is probably my very favorite thing that I have in my toolkit because it gets me out of some really tricky situations when tripods aren't allowed at all. Now this is never considered a tripod, this TFA01, but sometimes I can't set it up. A lot of the times I'm shooting off of rooftops or different buildings or sky lounge access places that are in high points in cities, and I don't have a rail that I can put anything on. What I can do is clamp to a surface. So this is really useful because I can actually clamp down to any railing, any support beam, or even a part of a concrete wall and still set up a camera and have it be rock solid and stable. The other nice thing about this clamp is right now I have the ball head screwed into the top, but it screws into each side here, here, and here. So if I clamp it this way, or this way, I can still put the ball head on the top orientation and have my camera set up in pretty much any situation I find myself in. Some people use the Manfrotto Super Clamp, but this is a fraction of the weight and just as powerful. It'll actually crank down as far as you want it to go to the point where you can accidentally break things. So if you do have one of these safari clamps, just be careful. If you're attaching it to the side of your tripod or anything that might crack or crumble, you could easily destroy it. So just keep that in mind. So this guy right here is my PG02 Pano gimbal set from Really Right Stuff. It allows me to create multi-row seamless panoramic images all based on a nodal point, and calculating that nodal point gets a little bit advanced, but don't worry, we're going to cover it extensively once we get to Cinque Terre. When I decided that I was going to get rid of nearly everything that I own and become 100% location independent, I knew that it meant that if something broke or I had to have something replaced, it was going to be terribly difficult because I'm traveling from place to place. So it was really important to me that I bought the highest quality stuff possible, stuff that I knew would last as long as I'd be using it. And that's why I'm using Really Right Stuff tripods. I truly believe they're the best built tripods on the market. The other nice thing is once you buy into a certain system, it's all cross-compatible. So using these systems and these L plates, I know that any combination of any of these heads with any of these tripods and my cameras will always work seamlessly. So whatever I pick up and whatever I take in the field will always work and always be reliable. This little tripod is aluminum and this is aircraft aluminum here. So those are actually the only two aluminum things that I have. Everything else that I have, they're all carbon fiber tripods. Now, carbon fiber tripods are definitely more expensive than aluminum tripods, but they also weather much better. So if you're using them in sandy environments and dynamic environments, salt water will start to corrode the aluminum, will start to destroy it over time, where carbon fiber remains more resilient. The other clear advantage of carbon fiber over aluminum is investing in carbon fiber is also investing in a lower weight system overall. So the same tripod in aluminum would weigh more than this and actually would be less stable. The way carbon fiber works, and this particular weave that Really Right Stuff has developed, actually mitigates vibration from the top down and the bottom up. So by the time any vibration from the ground gets about midway up, it's completely mitigated. The thing about aluminum is aluminum transmits vibration. So if you ever have an aluminum tripod and you click the shutter and you're holding onto the tripod, you'll actually feel that shutter click reverberate through the tripod leg. This actually disperses it over time. I'm well known for bracketing and producing blends of different exposures put together, so it's really important to me that I have the most stable system possible because I know I'm going to have to blend those frames. I don't want anything to move over time. That's why I use carbon fiber, but that's also why I use ball heads. I feel like they're the quickest, easiest way for me to work because I can just easily clip a camera in and rotate it around any way I like it, and as soon as I twist this, it locks it in to the point where there's no way that I can move it at all. It's rock solid. Obviously, there are other tripod solutions besides ball heads, but I've just become accustomed to using them over time. I feel it's the fastest way that I can frame my shot and lock it down with accuracy. These tripods by Really Right Stuff are the best on the market, but they also come with a very high price tag. Now, I do this for a living. I've been a photographer for many years, and I've slowly invested in all of this over time. So don't feel bad if you can't afford it right out of the gate. A small tripod, something portable, will work well too. No respectable landscape or travel photography kit would be complete without a set of filters. All the filters I use and I travel with are made by Format Hi-Tech. Now let me walk you through some of the filters that I use and how I use them specifically in the field. Remember when I was talking about the Nikon 14-24 versus the 16-35? Let's take a look at the filter system for the 14-24. Now, this is made by a company called Lucroy, and it actually uses 165 millimeter filters. Now, I do have a couple of these. I actually travel with a 4-stop solid neutral density and a 10-stop solid neutral density. Now, these are really great. They cover this lens without any glare from any side. It actually blacks out all 4 sides here, so no light from behind can cause any glare on these filters. The disadvantage, though, is their size. Look at the difference between a 165 to a 100. The difference is huge. So when you're working in dynamic weather conditions, you might have water spray all over the place. Things are getting on the front of these resin filters, and the larger they are, the more things they'll attract. That's water, bugs, sand, dirt, what have you. So these are really great, but I'm trying to transition into just using these 100 millimeter filters because they work with all of my lenses except for the 14-24. So let's talk specifically about the 100 millimeter square filter solution. Again, these are made by Format Hi-Tech, and they make 2 different types. One is a resin, so it's more of a plastic light material, and one is called Firecrest, which is glass. It's a little bit more heavy. This has been recently created by Format Hi-Tech, and it's phenomenal. So right now I use a combination of both. Now these square filters are really great because they work with every one of my cameras, again, except for the 14-24, and let me show you how that works. The reason they work with all the cameras is they work with this filter holder, and this filter holder attaches to each one of my cameras using a different millimeter filter ring. And I have 3 of them right here. I have a 77, a 58, and a 72. So 77 is the most common. That works with my 16-35 Nikon and my 24-70. This 72 works with my 10-24 on the Fujifilm, and they're really easy to use. You basically just thread it up really carefully, and you can screw them right on to the camera. You just have to be really careful when you do this. You don't want to accidentally cross-thread anything, so make sure that it fits snug. Just like screwing on any other filter, filter adapter ring is going to be exactly the same. Once you screw the adapter ring on, the filter holder will just slide over the front, and then there's a locking pin to screw on that just locks it in tight. And again, it can be rotated with filters just by loosening that pin and closing it down again. Once the filter holder's in place, any of these filters can slide into the holder system. Standard holder system holds 3 filters, so I can actually stack 3 different filters on the front of this camera. The nice thing is, using a combination of these 100mm filters and my different adapter rings, I can put this on the front of every lens I have except for the 14-24. So this is a standard Format Hi-Tech filter holder. It has 3 filter slots in place, but I also use another one that I've built that's a little bit custom for some different tasks, and that's this one right here. This one's slightly modified so that it has, instead of a 3rd slot, it actually has a polarizer at the end of it and 2 additional slots. This is kind of nice because instead of having screw-on polarizers in every single size for every single one of my lenses, this allows me to use one polarizer for all my lenses, very similar to the way that I use one set of neutral density filters in the different adapter rings. So it's very powerful. This is really cool, but it's also really difficult to assemble in the field because of these little screws. So when I find myself needing it, I'd rather have both options available so I don't have to lose any of these screws in the field and assemble something on the fly. As far as the square filters that I travel with, and I've already talked a little bit about resin versus Firecrest. Currently, I'm only traveling with the Firecrest, but I wanted to show you guys the difference. There's really not that much difference to the eye. One's more of a plastic resin base and one's glass, but the weight is a little bit different. The Firecrest is going to weigh a little bit more. But in the field, the reason I like Firecrest the most is honestly, it's much easier to clean than this resin. Resin seems to get a little bit more difficult and a little bit more hazy quickly when you're dealing with saltwater conditions, whereas this glass seems to wipe free and clear much more quickly. Out of the neutral density filters, let's talk about the ones that I actually carry. The filters I carry are all part of a kit that I've developed with Format Hi-Tech called the Signature Edition Travel Filter Kit. And I use a 4-stop solid neutral density filter and a 10-stop solid neutral density filter. I also use a 3-stop graduated neutral density filter. So these solid neutral density filters allow me to drag the shutter speeds to really great lengths. So right now this 4-stop might be able to add a little bit longer of a shutter speed, where this 10-stop can give me shutter speeds of anywhere from 2 to 6 minutes. This allows me to adjust where that neutral density falls on the lens. So when I have it in this filter holder, I can slide it up and down so that I can tame down a really bright sky. When I'm working with long exposure photography, it's important to me that I get everything right in one single RAW, because when I'm dealing with exposure times of 2 to 4 minutes, I don't want to do any bracketing because that'll take forever. Lighting happens really fast, so it's important to me to get everything exposed properly. When you're dealing with long exposure in bright situations, you'll notice that the sky is the first thing to blow out, so this helps me just control that light a little bit. As I mentioned, I'm using a lot of these square filters because they're really simple to use and change on all the camera systems, but screw-on filters also have their advantages. The biggest advantage, less contact surface for water or bugs to get on, and there's less to clean. So when this gets dirty, it's much easier to wipe off than this guy here. So if you have a lens that you use, your favorite lens, it's always good to have a spare neutral density filter and maybe a spare polarizer as well, because if you're just going to use that lens all the time, it's much easier to deal with a small surface than a large surface. The screw-on filters that I use are not stackable. They are ultra slim and low profile. Some filters you can buy, and even the ones from Format Hi-Tech, come in options where you can stack them. So you can stack a solid neutral density against a polarizer and create a double filter effect. Now bear in mind, the more that you do this, the more vignetting you're going to have on the lens, especially at wide angles. If you're using the 16 to 35, you'll notice this dramatically at 16 millimeter. With my screw-on filters, I never stack them. If I'm going to stack filters, I use these square ones because they're easy to adjust. The biggest disadvantage of these screw-on filters is then you need a set in each millimeter size, whereas these square ones, you just need a different adapter ring. My Signature Edition kit is sort of streamlined just for travel, so it comes with a 4 and 10 stop solid and 3-stop graduated neutral density, but they make kits that have every filter combination imaginable. So if you really want to get into using filters, it might be wise to have 2 or 3 of each. So maybe a 4, a 6, and a 10 stop solid, and a 3 and a 5-stop grad. So you can see the difference. I actually have a 5-stop grad and a 3-stop grad. And the only difference is that the 5-stop will get darker quicker on the top. So I find this lighter one a little bit more useful in every situation. But if you're shooting a lot of video too, or you're shooting a lot of things that are really crucial for the lighting, it might be worth picking up some additional ones as well. All this may seem like a lot, but most of it is just for demonstration purposes. The filter kit that I've developed with Format High Tech really just focuses on the 3 filters that I use the most, and that's 2 solid neutral density filters at 4 stops and 10 stops. So think of that as sunglasses for your camera. It allows me to get longer shutter speeds, get softer water, and soft dreamy clouds, so it's a really nice effect. The other filter, the 3rd filter I travel with, is a 3-stop graduated neutral density filter, and it's not 3 stops solid. You'll see that there's a nice gradation from light or clear all the way to 3 stops on the top. So right in the middle, you start to get to 1 stop, 2 stops, and 3 stops, and you can easily slide that up and down in the filter kit and adjust the amount of neutral density you're getting anywhere on the frame. You've probably had that issue where you have a really nice foreground and a blown out sky, or a really dark foreground and a perfect sky. These graduated neutral density filters give you the ability to fix that in camera without resorting to bracketing. In simplest terms, it can be used to tame a really hot sky. While I don't use polarizers very often, they are very useful in different shooting situations. My favorite place to use a polarizer is when I'm shooting through glass. And I do a lot of architectural photography in different cities like Tokyo and Shanghai, where you usually have to shoot behind glass. So a simple twist of a polarizer can get rid of a lot of the reflections and make it much easier to shoot through those glass environments. Another thing that a polarizer can do in landscapes is it can cut down on the atmospheric haze and add some clarity and contrast to your scene. One more thing to note about neutral density filters is I've been calling them 4 stops, 6 stops, 10 stops, but they're actually rated at a number value that's a little bit different. So this one says 3.0. Well, 3.0 is a 10-stop filter, and that makes a 1.5 a 5-stop, a 1.2 a 4-stop. So when you're seeing the grad, a 0.9 is actually a 3-stop. I know it's a little bit confusing, but you get used to it after a while. Camera Raw technology and Photoshop have given us the ability to fake a lot of these neutral density effects, especially with a graduated filter. But you are going to run into some situations when you can't fake certain things. It's very difficult to fake soft water and soft skies. So when you're using solid neutral density filters, the effects that you get at 2 and 4 minutes are not achievable in Photoshop alone. So you're going to find yourself wanting to use these filters when you start getting into some more advanced photography. But when you're just starting out, don't worry too much if you don't have filters. It's something that you'll grow into over time. Throughout this tutorial, I'll be slowly introducing each one of these filters so you'll get a chance to see how I use them in the field and how you can use them yourself. Now, I know I've gone over a ton of gear and it can be a little bit overwhelming, but don't worry, just follow the link below to find a list of everything that I use and how I use it in the field. So you're probably asking yourself, how do I travel with all this stuff? Well, let's take a look at the bags I use to carry this all over the world. Remember all that gear that we saw on the table? Now it's time to talk about how I travel with it full time and the bags I use to take it with me on the airplane. Believe it or not, most of what you see here is going to fit perfectly into this airport commuter backpack by Think Tank Photo. Before I get started, let's talk about the things that don't go on the airplane with me. There are a few things that go in my check luggage. There are also a couple of lenses that Naomi takes with her because she uses them more often than I do. So the first thing I'm going to do is take away what goes into my check bag, and that's going to be these 2 tripods and these 2 containers here. This is all the pano and gimbal stuff that you guys saw. Remember all that? That goes in the check bag. This other packing cube holds everything else, holds tripod heads, filters, filter holders, peripherals, cables, different things like that, lens cleaners, and anything that I don't need to be traveling with in the airplane. This year I decided to change things up a little bit and change from a 2 carry-on system into a single backpack, and I chose the Think Tank Photo Airport Commuter. This is the mid-size backpack in the same line. There's one that they make that's a little smaller as well as a little bigger. I picked the medium-size one because it fits in nearly all the overhead compartments as well as the seat in front of me on the airplane. So I can take this pretty much everywhere. The other nice thing about a backpack is when you wear this into an airport, people don't weigh it as often as they do with a roller. So I used to have a roller and a shoulder bag, and nearly every time I was in Europe, the airlines would weigh it and they'd see that it weighs an extraordinary amount and they wouldn't want me to carry it on the airplane. With this backpack, it makes it much easier to travel internationally all over the world without any issues at all. Believe it or not, everything you see here fits seamlessly and perfectly into this backpack. So let's get started and see how that works. just had a look at how I pack this airport commuter backpack that is now my full-time travel bag, but I also wanted to talk about what I used to use, which is a roller and shoulder bag combination. This is an Urban Disguise and an Airport International roller. It's the international size. They do make a larger one that works well in the United States. And in fact, I like this combination much more than a single backpack because it holds much more. And it's a lot easier to swap things in and out of these bags when I'm traveling. But here's the deal. In the United States, you can travel anywhere on any airline with stuff and nobody will ever question you. Internationally, sometimes the carry-on restrictions are 1 item and 7 kilos. So this bag that I just packed weighs about 18 to 20 kilos, which breaks all of the airline restrictions internationally. But here's the thing. They never weigh this when it's on my back. But the second I try to get on a small plane with 2 items, a shoulder bag and a roller, they will immediately weigh the roller bag. If I get on a really small plane like a CRJ or a prop plane, a Dash 8 or anything like that, I can't even bring this on. I have to gate check it, which means that I have to take every lens out of it and then check the bag. This they never question and never mess with. So it led me to really switch to something a little bit simpler, to a single bag solution, just so I can get on more planes without any hassle. Now, I've never been in a situation where I've had to check anything valuable. I've always been able to negotiate my way out of it. But I got tired of having to negotiate. After years of traveling and nearly 1 million miles with just this configuration alone, I decided to simplify my life down to 1 bag. So that means that now I do check more of my stuff, more of my gear, but I don't check anything fragile. Anything fragile that I have comes with me on the airplane. Everything else gets put into a check bag. If you're accustomed to flying in the United States, it's not like everywhere else in the world. You can have 2 giant items. I could have 2 giant rollers that weigh anything. If I check in with a United States airline and my bag, my check bag is overweight, they'll say, can't you carry that on with you? That doesn't happen in Europe. They want you to have that 7 or 12K mark. So this bag is already big, and to be honest, it doesn't just break the weight restrictions, it breaks some of the size restrictions, but I don't know, there's just something special about having 1 item on your back. They don't usually mess around with you, but if I had this plus this or this plus this, it would be a deal breaker in Europe. It would be a deal breaker in Asia. They definitely try to make me check some of this kind of stuff. So it's definitely something to take into consideration depending on where you're going to travel. And I know most of you guys have a home, or I hope most of you guys have a home anyway, so you can have multiple bags. You can pick a configuration for whatever situation you're trying to travel in. Personally, I've been on the road full time for more than 3 years, so I have to take everything that I have with me all the time. So I never get a chance to swap out bags. This is a special situation where I wanted to have everything here to show you guys. But for the most part, once I take this with me, it's all I have unless I schedule a pickup or a drop-off somewhere where I can ship stuff for a friend to hold. I don't have the luxury of swapping bags in between trips. Just one quick thing I want to talk about too. In addition to this backpack, in my check bag, I also have a speed belt and some different modular skin sets by Think Tank. They're really nice because they pack down to nothing. They don't weigh anything. They have built-in rain guards too if it starts to rain. And this actually attaches to this bag. It'll run through the back and I can use it as a belt loop in the field, and it gives me 2 extra compartments to hold lenses or different things like that. And throughout this video series, you'll probably see me just wearing this sometimes because I use this on my belt just for filters and things like that for easy access. But this doesn't weigh very much, so this also gets put in the check bag. And then when I'm out in the field, I decide what comes with me in the backpack and what comes with me in this speed set. So now we've had a really good look at all the gear I use, how I pack it, and how I travel with it on the road. But now that you've seen all the gear, it's time to talk about how I use it. Before we get into the main part of this tutorial, I want to show you guys the basics of how I use all this gear, from basic camera settings all the way through the features that I use in each one of my cameras.